Hi, everybody. Hi, Dr. Karen. We are doing something a little bit unusual. It's just me and Alison today for Honey Badger Radio 70 something.
78. 78.
Oh,
for fuck's sake.
78. Well, it was Rant Zirk 73 today, and so how am I supposed to keep track of all this? But it's just me and Alison because everybody else is stuffing their faces with turkey at the moment. All of our American fans are just like cramming. Yeah, they're just absolutely shoving it. The tryptophan, it's like it's flowing. And
we all know that means they're going to be anesthetized. So we can now talk plainly.
If they're not still eating, they're passed out in ecstasy. So essentially, we decided that since we are Canadians and we celebrated our Thanksgiving before the snow flew about 18 months ago, we would do a broadcast tonight, just me and Alison, and we would discuss this sort of hyper, ultra, crazy, controversial idea that she has that left and right politics and feminism and all of that stuff. And maybe even discuss the Trumpster, since he certainly has not had enough attention paid to him in recent months and years, and see where he fits in all of this. But yeah, no, it's just me and Alison tonight, and I think I've rambled on enough. Do we have any business to take care of before we get into things?
Well, we have some business. I am going to be covering with Karen, because somebody in one of the previous videos that I put up said, you know, Alison, why don't you just explain it to Karen and have Karen explain it to all of us? Because you sound like you're having a nervous breakdown, and maybe I am. But yeah, so my theory is that the left has essentially consolidated its win in this recent upcoming election, which is an intuition I had from sort of the start, although I didn't know how exactly it would play out. But I think I have an analogy or a metaphor that may work, finally. And I recognize that there are a lot of people out there who think I'm full of shit. And sometimes I agree with them, quite often. So yeah, hopefully this one will be the one that explains where I'm coming from and people will stop saying that I'm a fascist. I'm not sure how that works, but...
People were saying you're a fascist?
Yeah. And also a leftist, and I also had one guy saying that I hate gay men. It was a very interesting time. It was interesting times. So lots of drama. But
it was the worst of times.
It was the worst of
times.
It was
the weirdest of times.
It was the weirdest of times. That is a very good way to put it. So I guess some businesses, we still have a fundraiser. It's currently just open. It's for getting furnishings in the Badger Cave, and also we have one item that might be of interest to Karen listeners. It is a option to purchase the rights to name Karen's smoking room, but we might also include in that the right to be named as in the acknowledgement
and the
dedication of whatever psychotic literary thing that we come up with when that room is operational, and Karen can come and we can scheme.
Yeah, no. See, I mean, like the entire point of the room is it really is a smoking room. It's like a room because I'll tell you what, I'm never gonna visit the Badger Cave for any length of time if I can't sit inside and smoke. If I cannot get away from the snow and the 40 below, or get away from the mosquitoes and the wasps, I will not spend I will stay at home and I will just, do my normal Skype thing. Because, honestly, having to get up and get your entire kit, I can't sit around in my boxer shorts and then, pack all my crap and go and sit out on a curb somewhere with my...
No, but
I have to put on pants. I mean, what the fuck?
But the whole idea is to stop Karen from echoing.
All right.
Mute yourself, woman. The whole idea is to have a place where we can collaborate away from a lot of Karen's very, very, very involved in onerous personal duties that she takes on, which are onerous.
Not really. I mean, honestly, I don't really do much outside of this work these days. It's the work. The work is it. It's I have monomania when it comes to doing this.
Okay, all right. So essentially the
idea.
Karen, you're echoing again. This is going to be annoying, isn't it? Because the echo problem is back.
I muted.
All right, thank you. Well, the essentially the idea is to give Karen the headspace to work on. We're working on a book, and it's going to be called The Negative Sum Game. Thank you, Karen. And we're hoping to just be able to collaborate much more intensively, get more work done via this space for Karen, as it were. And I find that through my experience with Honey Badger Radio, it does work a lot better when the collaboration is in person. I think a lot of the stuff that's coming out now that I've done is because I had some time to go to the ground with Mike and Brian and just spend time thinking and talking with them and figuring shit out. It's much harder on Skype than it is in person. There's a lot of shit that isn't conveyed when it's over the internet. So if you enjoy the series that I put on, and the next part of the series will be how the left will lose, then consider enabling me and Karen to do some collaboration, because I think some really great things will come of it. And yes, Karen must smoke or she cannot do anything. So
I absolutely must. It's required. And I must not have to get up and move somewhere else to do it.
Oh, somebody asked, what do we need for the smoking room? First of all, if you want to go help us out with the basic furnishings for the Badger Cave, the smoking room is a little bit above and beyond that. What we would need is essentially the money to demolish, put up drywall, put in a decent thing that Karen can lie on, so some sort of couch that's reasonable. We need to put in a venting system so that we can vent easily, so we can suck all the air out in like 6 seconds.
Well, all you really need, if there's a window in the room, all you really need is a window fan blowing out.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work because it's a crank out. Like it's one of those windows that.
Oh, yeah, fuck's sake.
Yeah, but it can be worked with. It needs some TLC to make it livable, to get rid of the current plumbing in it. So probably about 5,000 will do the entire thing, plus some furnishings. And if somebody wants to throw that in the kitty all at once, they'll get acknowledgement for whatever comes out of that space. Whatever interesting things come from a collaboration between the two of us. Since, I don't know.
It probably won't be Trudeau Lacey Green porn.
No. Wait, you told me I couldn't mention that.
I know. But, okay. You couldn't mention it in the salacious manner that you kept mentioning it in the live stream earlier today. But
all I said
over and over.
You actually made it better. Elbow cocky.
Elbow cocky.
Elbow cocky. Yeah. Elbows akimbo. Like, okay, I won't continue because I know that you didn't want me to. I don't know why you created this opening. Anyway,
it's fine. It's okay. But there may be some other horrible things that nobody's mother would want their children looking at, coming out of that room, out of the minds of Alison and myself. So there you go.
Lacey Green spanking Lesdom, possibly. Anything could happen. It's a real wild card area. Anyway, if you want to throw a few shekels in, every bit helps. $5, $10, whatever. It's www.feedthebadger.com/honeybadger. No, it's www.feedthebadger.com. Just go there, select the basic furnishings for the Badger Cave, and do that. Help us out. All right. Yeah, we need 600 rolls of duct tape, red green style renovations. Everything will be made out of duct tape. Everything.
Yes.
Your ass doesn't stick to it. It's not real furniture.
And if the roof leaks, we'll just put a canoe up there on top of the roof, upside down. That'll fix it. I'll just slap it on there, tie it down with some zip ties, and
Conspiracy says, Alison, you weren't clear enough in your series. You should have said that the liberals owned the moral zeitgeist in the social sense they won. Lots of fluff could have been cut out that way. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with something that you understand on an intuitive level, but you're trying to grope to make into a logical and understandable concept, it doesn't, hindsight is 2020. Yeah, it would have been a lot easier had I started, for example, with the following metaphor that I devised yesterday after dealing with a whole bunch of people who were calling me a fascist. Was it fascist? Anyway. Yeah, okay, so this is sort of a metaphor about what I'm talking about, taken from the Game of Thrones. Let's imagine there existed a medieval kingdom long ago with two powerful families, always at the brink of civil war. The first family was the family of the Red Crest, and the second family was the family of the Blue Crest. These two families fought bitterly over the two greatest positions, the two greatest thrones in the land, the throne of man and the throne of God. The throne of man granted the man sitting on it, the king sitting on it, power over the guilds of merchants and blacksmiths and all the other workmen in the land, and the kingdom's immense treasury. The throne of God granted the man sitting on it absolute authority over the college of priests that studied the word of God and the preachers' pulpits that rang with that word throughout the land. During one particularly pitched and brutal battle, the families clashed over the throne of man. To win, the family of the Red Crest had to pull its soldiers away from protecting its holdings in the college of priests. Thousands of their own unprotected brothers were slaughtered, routed out by the college. Routed out of the college, ending any possible legitimacy the Red Crest had over the college of priests. With no opposition, the very night they were killed, a new pope from the family of the Blue Crest was chosen to occupy the throne of God. Yet at the end of the bloody battle, the family of the Red Crest was victorious over the throne of man. They celebrated long into the night, not realizing what had happened. As the dawn broke and all gathered before the coronation in the Capitol Square, the new king, the heir to the family of the Red Crest, entered to receive his crown. The two thrones sat shining in the sun, one gold, the throne of man, and the one above it, made of platinum, the throne of God. The throne of God was already occupied. The blue-crested pope needed no one to crown him. The new king, shocked at the turn of affairs, approached the throne of man, but because he could do nothing else, he bowed before the new pope. All across the land, the priests and the preachers, all wearing a blue crest on their robes, spoke of revolution against the red-crested king, and they were unopposed by the slain red-crested priests. And bookies gave the king occupying the throne of man 4 years before his head was on the chopping block. All right, so there we go. I don't know if that helps. Seemed to help with some people, but silence on your end, Karen. I think you're having trouble with the mute button. Do I just keep going? Can't hear you, Karen. I wonder, okay, well, I guess I'll just keep going. Sorry about that. Guys, so I guess I'll just respond to the chat. If you guys want to talk to me until Karen gets back. Someone says, Danny G. Champ says, I think I understand you perfectly, Alison. I just think that the right hasn't given up their chunk of the church of the women worsting. They've just doubled down on the over there brand of it. So what he means is that they've doubled down on looking at, the threat of the men in another land coming and raping our women, or how much danger that they pose to us militarily, etc. I think so, but I think there's some elements of this stuff that go beyond this particular situation with the presidency. The left was sort of losing their the right was losing their hold over the moral standard that they had that opposed the left's moral standard. So the right's moral standard was essentially family values. And there's been a whole bunch of stuff that's happened since then, since it was really the moral rallying cry of our entire culture, that has weakened it significantly. the first off, the family, like the family values standard, if it were to actually be capable of opposing the left's moral standard, which is granting boons, granting stuff to people who are in a position of what they would consider to be disenfranchised people. So freeing the people who are disenfranchised, freeing women, giving them the most liberty possible, as per Charles Fourier's original formulation of feminism. If we look at that, the right has Karen, where the hell are you? You've muted yourself, Karen, and you have not yet unmuted. So basically, I'm trying to carry this alone, and I suck at that. So I'm just okay. You know what? I'm gonna just completely fuck up your channel. I'm just gonna go. And,
no. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Jesus Christ.
Motherfucker.
Ah.
No, I just literally had like 10 minutes of the spinning color wheel of death. I tried to unmute. I got the color wheel. I just
got to address something.
Okay.
Okay. Someone in chat says that Bering doesn't like me. Bering hates Alison. Karen is dead. Why, Jesus? Did Bering say that he hated me? Because I don't remember that.
Ignore it.
Chat. Did Bering say that he hated me?
Ignore it, Alison.
Okay.
I hate you.
Oh yeah, I understand, and I can understand that too. I'm like really fucking confusing to listen to. Yeah, I would hate me too if I wasn't me. But regardless, what I'm trying to get at is the moral standard that the right used to be able to, and to have an equivalent moral standard to what the left has, the right would have to be able to create laws around family values. It would have to be able to ostracize people around family values. It would have to be able to get them fired around family values. It would have to be able to enforce an authoritarian version of family values, not a personal version of family values, not a community level family values, but an authoritarian government level of family values, to have a moral standard equivalent to what the left has, because the left is definitely influencing laws. It is influencing academia, academic regulations. It is influencing people, whether or not they have jobs. It can get people fired. It's socially ostracizing them. It has incredible powers within society to enact its moral agenda. And not just that, unlike the family values contingent, which came out of the church, Christianity, the left has a direct pipeline into politics because it's not considered a church. The regressive left is not considered a church, so it has a direct pipeline into politics. So at the moment, there is nothing on the right that can really oppose the left's moral consolidation over the throne of God. And yes, go ahead, Karen.
So much of the right, or the sort of the traditional family values thing, right? Like Janice Fiamengo did a wonderful video today on how feminists own history. They own the past, right? Which means they control the past, which means they control the future, right? And she went into, sort of Victorian era Canada, right? So, 1800s Canada, and the types of laws that were in place to protect women, like way back before feminism existed, right? Back when if a woman was raped, she was blamed for it. If a woman, it was just this horrible thing and men could get away with it and all of this stuff, right? In reality, Canada had seduction laws, right? So a man even having consensual sex with a woman in a way that she or her parents were unhappy about afterwards, like maybe she said he promised that he would marry her, or even that she thought he would marry her and had expected him to marry her, even though he had made no promise, right? That guy could go to jail. He'd go to prison for 2 years for having sex with a woman in such a way that she felt taken advantage of, right? And feminists, even feminist historians go back and they look at those cases. They talk about how those cases limit female sexuality, how they repress female sexuality, how they make women not free in their choices in terms of how to exercise their sexuality. None of these women were being prosecuted for sex crimes. None of these women spent any time in prison. It was just essentially, it was like, oh, if I have sex, some guy will go to jail, so therefore I'm not allowed to have sex. So that's a crime against me. That's a wrong, an injustice against me as a woman. And never mind that man who's sitting in jail, right? Because my dad didn't like him or whatever, or he was already married, so my dad couldn't force him to the altar with a shotgun. Right. So you essentially have this whole system, and all it's done is it hasn't shifted its focus at all. All it has done is essentially, when the left took over, the left was just like, women should have all of this, women should have as much freedom as possible. Right. But they should still have all the same protections, blah, blah, blah. So what do we have now? We have affirmative consent. What is that if it's not a seduction law?
Yeah, basically. And I'd like to point out from all this, what you're saying, this current attempt by the regressive left, or whatever you want to call them, to give women complete liberty with no expectation of responsibility is, at its core, feminist. This is a feminist formulation of how we judge society. Charles Fourier, Fourier said this, and a lot of people said, well, he lived in the 1700s or whenever, and he was just speaking of his time. But if you actually look at what he was writing about, he said essentially exactly what Karen just said.
Yeah, he said we should get rid of seduction laws, right? So that a woman wouldn't be shamed, for engaging in consensual sex with a man when it's not socially appropriate. Right. She should feel no shame. She should feel no social censure at all. Right. But the guy should still go to jail.
Yeah. Essentially, the thing that he used to describe how societies were, and his formulation was that a society should be judged by how much liberty. So social progress is tied to how much liberty you give your women. Full stop, no qualification. No, not looking at the responsibilities of citizenships, the obligation, nothing. Just full stop, liberty to women, the end. That is the only metric by which we judge social progress for a society. And that is the foundational principle of feminism, that we just judge society by how well it liberates women. And the example that Charles Fourier used, and this is what I say to the people who say, oh, well, he was just talking in his time, and it was under the assumption that women were literally chattel back then. The example he used of a woman, the only example that wasn't ahistorical, was actually not based on a false reading of history, was the British law in which a man could sue the recognized lover of his wife. So this guy, everybody knew that this guy was boning his wife, and he could sue him for basically the support that he was legally obligated to pay for her upkeep. So he took a law in which one man sues another man over a legally enforced obligation to his wife and said that restricts women's freedom. It boggles the fucking mind.
The equivalent would be to say, okay, you have a case of paternity fraud, right? So you have a woman, she's married, she has an affair, she gives birth to a kid, she tricks her husband into thinking it's his kid, she divorces him or whatever, he's stuck paying child support, then he finds out it's not his kid, right? And he sues the biological father, okay? That would be considered an injustice against the woman. That would be considered a restriction on her liberty.
By Charles Fourier, who formed the basic fundamental tenet of feminism. He considered that a restriction on women's liberty. There is nothing that this guy, judging from that example, any kind of expectation, sense of responsibility, he wasn't talking about a situation in which women were second-class citizens or whatever, or literally chattel. He was literally, or he was explicitly saying that the only thing we need to judge society on is how it liberates women. The end, full stop, period, gone. That's it. And that is what feminism was founded on. The principle.
Well, then you look at the historical example that Janice Fiamengo gave, which was, essentially you have these seduction laws. And there was this one case she discussed where it was it was like a man and his daughter, and they took in a boarder or whatever, and she was 15. The man was an adult. The dad caught them having consensual sex. Apparently, this had been going on for quite some time. It was completely consensual. The dad had guy prosecuted under the seduction laws. And the feminist historian who was discussing this case it was just, never mind that man over there sitting in prison, right? These seduction laws inhibit women's sexual freedom. That is the only thing she was interested in, was how the seduction laws inhibited women's sexual freedom, repressed women's sexuality, right? Never mind that the only person who was punished in this scenario, I mean, the girl went back home to live with her dad, maybe she had a bad reputation afterwards or whatever, like she might have been called a slut. I don't know. But this guy sat in jail. He sat in prison over this, right? And it was her sexual freedom that was unjustly restricted. It was her sexual freedom that was the only point of interest for this feminist, right? And this during an era where, this particular historian was arguing that, okay, a lot of feminists have it wrong in the sense that there were no protections for that. Like to hear feminists talk today, up until the 1960s, rape was perfectly legal, right? When in reality, it's the last non-lethal capital crime in every single Western country that could result in the death penalty, other than treason. So you're looking at it only in terms of how it negatively impacts women, regardless of how it negatively impacts men. And this is like 100%, even for a feminist who says, yes, rape was against the law. Yes, rape was taken very seriously back then. Yes, again, contrary to what feminists these days will tell you, right? Rape was considered a very serious crime, and it was prosecuted, and lots of women saw their rapists go to prison, and some of them even saw their rapists hanged, right? Even her could not look at it outside of the context of how the rules and constraints and laws governing sexuality impacted women. That was the only thing she was really interested in, was how those things negatively impacted women. So, yeah.
Okay, so there's a few things that I noticed from chat. Someone said, click accept. This guy wasn't Hitler, though. There were different times. He couldn't envision the future of feminism. I'm pretty sure he would have been quite pleased with the future of feminism. Because if you look at his example, he didn't give a shit about the responsibilities on men or the risks that they themselves were dealt with. He didn't say, oh, well, women should pay for themselves, therefore they should. If women pay for themselves, they should have sexual freedom. He didn't say that. Men should still have to pay for women. Men should still take responsibility.
He didn't say that law that allowed a man to sue his wife's lover was unjust because it damaged a man, or even that it damaged a family, even that it, like you have this family and sure, it's a sham and the kid's not really yours, but right. For the sake of the kid, you just go through the motions and live with it. Right. No. He was arguing that this thing, right. This man who has 100% legally enforceable financial responsibility towards this woman and the child that she brought into the marriage, maybe by another man, right? Maybe depriving him of any chance of genetic progeny himself. Maybe she's like the one guy that Harry Crouch was talking about, where, there's 5 kids in the family, and, there's a medical emergency, and they discover one of the kids, the dad goes to give blood, and, oh, yeah, no, you can't, and this kid can't be yours. And oh my goodness, all 5 of these kids are not yours, right? That guy, he's got to be in his 40s now or something like that, 50s. Do you really think that he's going to start over, that he's going to be able, do you think a 60-year-old man who discovers that the kids that his wife presented him, right, and that he raised and paid for and loved and took care of, that none of them are actually biologically his? Do you think he's been cheated? He hasn't just been cheated of his money. He hasn't just been cheated of, his effort and his time and his love and tricked into this, right? He's been cheated of his own genetic legacy. He's been cheated of a chance of children of his own. And if anybody thinks that that's a petty concern for a man, I would love to see you argue that if babies get switched at the hospital and they go home with the wrong mothers, that those women don't have anything to be upset about.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Charles Fourier made his formulation, and he used an example in which you really have to do mental gymnastics to see the woman as the victim. Her husband's suing her lover for the husband's own financial obligation to his wife. That's, yeah. And if he couldn't actually see the responsibilities and the obligations on men and how they intersected with women's so-called lack of, I don't even understand what he saw lack of freedom there. It wasn't like the woman was being sued for alimony or child support that she got fraudulently. It was the man that she was having a relationship with. And yet he saw a lack of liberty there for women. I'm saying that his mind is exactly the same as the feminists we review that see a lack of liberty when it comes to sperm banks, or a lack of liberty when it comes to men spreading their legs on public transit, or a lack of liberty when a man explains something to them. It's the same mindset. It's the same ability to turn a microscopic P of lack of liberty. Oh, a woman can't freely choose a lover even when she's married, because the lover might be like, oh, I don't know if I want to become your lover. I might get sued by your husband for the support of whatever child I father on you. That's a lack of liberty on her part. That is the microscopic P of oppression that Charles Fourier focused on. And the feminism that we see today is exactly the same. He may not have predicted that feminism was the thing that would really catch on of all the things that he said, but this feminism that we see today, he probably would be proud of it. He would be proud of the fact that we completely throw men to the wolves in favor of giving women as much liberty as freaking possible. And we don't even throw men to the wolves. We throw everyone to the wolves in the favor of giving women as much liberty as freaking, we don't see it in terms of the effect on society, children, other men, other women. We just give them liberty. Don't make them answer for the negative consequence of their criminal or profoundly immoral actions. Just give them, throw them, shove liberty down their throats. That'll make a good society. And he was exactly the same. He had exactly the same mentality. And Danny Duchamp says, it seems like you're just bashing feminism again. This is not bashing feminism. Friend, this is feminism. This isn't bashing it. It's saying what it is. I mean, you're saying.
But he said, what happened to Trump and the what? COWW?
Well, you'd have to tell us what the COWW is. But this is feminism. This is not bashing feminism. It's recognizing it for what it is. It is a philosophy. I don't want to call it. It's an ideology in which the only moral good to consider at all is the freedom of women. You don't have to care about their obligations as a citizen, their responsibilities as citizens. All that matters is the freedom of women. And how much you can sacrifice as a society to grant women that freedom. That's it. And that is the judge of social progress. And that is feminism.
Well, and that's why feminism only came about when society got rich enough to be able to afford to subsidize women's freedom.
Okay, so he says you're not accurately describing feminism, and I was saying you're off topic. Okay, well, thank you. Well, it comes back into, I mean, because we're going to be covering a lot of interesting ground as we talk about this.
If this is the moral imperative of society.
Yeah, this is the moral, uncontested.
Whatever benefits women, right? And the right felt that, I think the right feels that women benefit most when they're protected and provided for, and the left benefits most when they feel women are free, right? But they don't want to give up the protected and provided for part.
No, and I would say that there's a lot, like the left, when it created its, I don't know if it created this schema or just lucked into it, but it has a strategy for destroying the moral rallying cry for the right. It may be a strategy of hindsight that we pick apart in autopsy now that the moral high ground, the moral rallying cry for the right is pretty much dead. It's done. It put a fork in it. It's done.
Well, it's because marriage. Once you describe marriage as the enslavement of women,
that's it. It's dead, folks. Okay, but I mean, there's what we're doing in describing feminism and what it is we're explaining the new moral, guidestone, or the moral. What we are saying is our moral guide to a just and equitable and social progress is liberty to women, unqualified liberty to women. If you think of liberty as a resource, which is something that me and Teal talked about a couple weeks ago, if you think of liberty as a resource, this is perfectly in line with our biological imperatives to provide resources for women. Except that this resource is completely abstract, and we could totally destroy and bankrupt a culture to provide this resource for women. I mean, we could create, and this is what feminism is doing. It's creating new ways that women lack liberty, and then we have to spend more money to remove these ways that women lack liberty.
Women need to be free from catcalling. They need to be free from rape. They need to be free from sexual assault. They need to be free from being objectified. They need to be free from manspreading. They need to be free from stare rape. They need to be free from having to pay for their own birth control and their own abortions. They need to be free from having to have a transvaginal ultrasound to determine the age of a fetus in the first 12 weeks. They need to be free from, consequences. They need to be free from, the outcomes of their choices. They need to be free from feeling unwelcomed in STEM fields. They need to be free from any kind of social pressure or any kind of social censure on their choices. They, even just, it's not enough. It's not enough that when, unlike before, when 200 years ago, when an unwed mother had a baby, she had to really struggle if she was going to keep it, and she had a really hard choice to make, to either keep it and essentially live in abject poverty and raise that child in abject poverty for the rest of her life, or she could give it up for adoption. That was a really difficult choice. Now, all of her choices must be made cost-free. She needs to be free from the costs of whatever she chooses to do once she gets pregnant as an unwed woman, right? And then when she divorces, she needs to be free from, any kind of obligation to provide access to her ex, to the children, all of those things, right? She needs to be free from that awkward 5-minute conversation when the kids are dropped off and picked up. Right? She needs to be free from all those things, right? Because those things, they are burdens on her, and she needs to be freed from the burden of them, right? And this is so much and it's only just, the coincidence of equal protection legislation, right? Equal rights legislation, which was implemented to free women. Right? To free women from their economic dependence on men, to free women from a man's authority, to free women from this, that, and the other, right? That's why that legislation was introduced. And that legislation, because it was vaguely worded, like a lot of legislation is in regard to this kind of thing, has been able to be used to impose some responsibilities on women. And it freed women the day it was enacted, and then it imposed those responsibilities in the decades after through case law and through, dozens of cases, hundreds, thousands of cases of men being destroyed, just as they always were, before a judge went, hey, wait a minute, women are economically independent. Why is this guy responsible for debts she racked up during the marriage?
All right. Feminism essentially is the formulation of men giving liberty to women. That's the resource that men give women in feminism. It's an abstraction. We could give an entire galaxy's gross domestic product to women in order to fund women's liberty, and women in feminism would find another galaxy's worth of GDP of needed money that needs to be spent to liberate women more from even more things. It's like an endless inflating cycle of liberating women. And
okay. Who said women were considered property?
This guy named GHDW, and I don't want to get too far into it because it'll be really off topic, but you're wrong, period. Let's move on. So this idea that feminism is traditionalism, except you take traditional materialism and you replace it with liberty, and those are the resources that men are expected to give women. And the context in which feminism is, the regressive left, is this idea that we go from the family values standard of a one man providing for one woman, providing his resources for one woman, to men as a class providing resources to women as a class, which incidentally supposedly gives them more liberty, gives women more liberty. They don't have to have a relationship with a man in order to have resources. They just use the government to extract the resources from men as a class to give the women as a class. And you'll notice that in the regressive left, socialism is only woman only. It's woman only. That's it. It's for example, black and poor women get welfare. Black poor men get prison. That's their welfare. Socialism is essentially woman only.
Housing, yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually a reiteration of these traditional ideas of men providing shit for women. Now, the reason why we're talking about Trump is because Trump represents not necessarily the total process of the right losing its moral moral gravitas, moral rallying cry, moral authority. Trump isn't responsible for the right losing its moral authority, but he is a culmination. He's sort of like a capstone on all of this, or the last nail in the coffin, because Trump is a Republican candidate. First of all, he is not liked by the Republican establishment. And it's not just because he's anti-establishment. He's also not a family values. He didn't run on a family values platform. Even his stance on abortion could be seen as a constitutionalist stance. I'll give it to the states to decide. Nothing about him is that traditional family values, conservative Christian Republican. And from this point, and the reason why I believe that he won, and I think this bears out in the people who voted for him, was because he wasn't that traditional family values Republican. Because a lot of the people that the Republican Party drew to the polls now were not just anti-establishmentarian, but had he been the traditional family values Republican, they wouldn't have voted for him because they're not interested in that. They just want the fiscal conservative aspects of the Republican Party, which is great. Like, I'm a libertarian-ish leaning person too. Generally, I try to stay politically neutral. But if I were to make a decision, it would be libertarian. And I like the fact that there is now a fiscally conservative, socially liberal option in the states. However, when you look at the situation in terms of reality, that means there isn't any kind of moral authority to oppose the left's moral authority. which means they rule the show. They own the throne of God because there's nothing powerful enough to oppose them. And Trump's win means that the Republican Party will probably never be able to run a family values platform. Not successfully. Now, there's nothing wrong with Trump, and there's nothing wrong with, I don't think that this is completely, I think, out of his control. It has nothing to do with his fitness as a candidate at all. It just is the facts that the Republicans only won because they sacrificed any possibility of ever gaining power again, moral authority again, of having any kind of way of contesting the regressive left morally. That's how they won. And as satisfying as it is to see an anti-establishmentarian candidate in the White House, and somebody who thumbs his nose, and somebody who is that kind of socially progressive but economically conservative person, he's like, there's a lot of people who are like, when I say this, they're like, yeah, so what? So what that he doesn't have any family values? That's why I voted for him, because he wasn't like that. It's like, yeah.
I wouldn't have freaking supported him if he was gonna like try and repeal same-sex marriage, and if he was gonna like, make abortion illegal across the United States, and if he was gonna, I don't know, bring back like freaking seduction laws and freaking anti-masturbatory freaking shit that you can strap on your boys, right, to keep them from jerking off. And if he was gonna like get rid of porn, and if he was gonna talk about how video games like create school shooters and shit like that, yeah, no, I wouldn't have voted for him if he was doing all that shit.
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of the people, the Republicans got out to vote in this election were exactly like that. But, and as much as satisfying as it is to have a fiscally conservative, socially liberal candidate, you still have to recognize that there's a problem here. There's a greater problem here. And that he won, but in winning, we've basically lost the throne of God to the regressive left. There's nothing to oppose their moral consolidation and power over society. And Winston Smith says, how did the right lose that moral authority, Alison? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what I wanted to go into. First of all, Trump didn't do this. He didn't do this at all. And he's not responsible for this.
No, it's been coming for a long time.
It's been coming for a long time. It's just that this is something that was basically inevitable. I believe there's aspects to this that I don't understand at all, that confuse the fuck out of me. But I know that the right was.
Trump just put the period at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, but I know that the right was losing moral authority far prior to him. And it really starts, well, first of all, we have to look at the setup of the US government, which is fundamentally, I'm not criticizing the setup of the US government. However, when you look at the setup, the right, and it is moral rallying cry, it's family values, which is established by the church, by the Christian church, has no direct access to the government. None. Because of the separation between church and state. Whereas the left, with its moral rallying cry of liberty to women, has a direct pipeline into the government. It has government departments established for its basically unfalsifiable, unquestionable belief system, which functions fundamentally as a religion. It has roots in academia, really deep roots, all over that. It has roots in the media. All of that. And also, like I said, no separation between it and the government. So it has a direct pipeline into influencing government policy. The regressive left's religion, feminist religion, has the kind of influence over government policy that would never be allowed if it was Christian. Never. Or any kind of religion with a supernatural element. Let's set aside how supernatural patriarchy works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at it this way. I was watching a video today by someone called Dr. G or something like that about, how and when to talk to your kids about white privilege. right? And she essentially started off by saying, okay, well, you can start to talk to your kids about it. She just defined white privilege. She says you can start to talk to your kids about it when they first develop the concept of fairness, right? Which is when they first start saying, that's not fair, okay? Which is about age 3. So I'm thinking to myself, this is what, I forget what fucking priest it was or whatever said that give me a child at age 4 or 5, give him to me for 7 years, and I will give you a devout Catholic for life, right? That she's essentially saying before the child's sense of self is even fully developed, before the child's sense of fairness is even fully developed, before the child's sense of others and their relation to him is fully developed, start to tell him either that because he's white, he has essentially cheated other people out of something important, or because he's black, he has been cheated out of something important, right? Something that, because of something that he can't change about himself, he's either cheating someone or being cheated, right? So if he's a black kid, why bother trying harder? Any failure can be blamed on the fact that the entire society is against you, and you don't have privilege. And if you're a white kid, you can't even be proud of winning the spelling bee, because who knows, the only reason you're a good speller could be because your parents had enough money, to or had enough opportunity. They weren't working 3 jobs each, and they could read you bedtime stories at night. So you have bedtime story reading privilege, which is a thing, apparently. Go look it up. Okay. And so essentially you're telling these, and that's just going to be beautiful for race relations, isn't it? You teach one set of kids to resent the other because the other set of kids have things that they don't have for no other reason than the color of their skin, that they can't get, that they can't earn, right? Because they're not white. And you teach this white kid that he has to feel guilty for harming other people. And you start when they're 3, not just when their minds haven't formed, right? And they're psychologically incapable of resisting your message. But when they are entirely under your control, you decide when they eat, when they sleep, what they eat, when they go to the bathroom, right? And so they can't even physically resist your message. And that's when you start. That's when you start feeding it to them, just cramming it in their mouths.
And feminism has a direct line to all of that.
Well, and feminism,
state funded. It's getting into education younger and younger and younger.
Yeah, no, Ontario was kicking around the idea of making preschool from age 2 up mandatory for all children.
Anyway, and then also in Ontario, and I believe there's other places in the West too, or in the US, there are actually bringing feminism into high schools and younger and younger and younger. And also feminist teachers bring it in. So it's like this constant drumbeat and there's nothing to prevent it because it has a direct pipeline into government. It's got government programs. It is consulting with the police. It's consulting with government bodies that gather statistics. It's receiving money to deal with social problems, which is unfucking believable. Churches don't get money from the government to deal with social problems. I just don't think they do. But it's like there are, when I looked into charity, there are some strict laws about how you cannot actually advocate for a particular religious point of view and be a charity. And yet feminism has managed to do all that because it's not seen as a religion. And so that's one way that feminism is actually more powerful than this kind of authoritarian family values that we used to live under. It has a direct pipeline to the government. It has direct pipeline to government lobbying, to the educational system, government-sponsored educational system, not like the Catholic schools. So it has this that makes it gives it much more reach, especially in this new age of radio and television. I'm not even getting into the internet now, but radio and television gave feminism far more reach than the pulpit and the church gave society before that. And you're talking about a time when the pulpit was the main gathering place, the main socialization for people, not the radio, not the TV, but going to church. Now it's completely different. So that's another thing that really destroyed this idea of authoritarian family values, not family values as a personal or community principle, but family values is something that you could create like an authoritarian system around. And I'm not saying that I am for that. I'm definitely not for that. I think most people listening to this are not for that. I'm just saying that that's the only thing that could really pose, at least up to this point, the only thing we had that could really pose a genuine counterbalance to the authoritarian, aggressive left's idea of ultimate liberation for women. And somebody said that the left and right are economic policies. No, they're not.
No, not exactly. No. If they're economic policies, they are not just economic policies. They are, in terms of taxation and spending and all of those things, they have very, very different views on what, not necessarily on how much tax should be collected, how much money people should have to pay for taxes and things like that, but what that money should be spent on. And they also have other views. It's not just, like economic policies, you're talking socialism and capitalism, right? Capitalism isn't always rightist, and socialism, is not the sole purview of the left. There's plenty of people who would consider themselves right-wing who embrace policies that some people would consider socialist. Socialist just means government takes a larger portion of the essentially what would be considered charitable contribution to society, right? So instead of people giving to charity or paying for their kids to go to school, to elementary school, or paying for their own healthcare, the government takes money and helps people out with that.
Well, okay, and the way that I would answer that, left and right are economic policies. They're also moral schemas. The right's moral schema is this idea that through family values, through application of family values, moral and legally, men are obligated to give money to an individual woman.
Well, and would also, and that each family is responsible for itself.
Yeah, and they would also argue that not only is it, would they make it morally, a man morally obligated to give money to an individual woman, but that also that individual woman, in pairing up with a man, makes him economically productive, which drives the capitalist engine. That's how family values is sort of like a positive loop for family values. And that's the way they would have traditionally looked at it when we were more of an authoritarian family value state. The left looks at it as in the family is the source of oppression of women. They want to liberate them from the family. So the way that we get resources to women is we take them from men as a class and give them to women as a class. The left, regressive left, believes in socialism, but it only believes in socialism for women only. So it's going to be from every man according to his ability to every woman according to her need. That's the regressive left's version of socialism, and you can see it in what they've implemented everywhere. So it's more than just that they're socialist. In fact, I find it hilarious when I listen to like Bernie Bros talk about socialism as if in the regressive left, socialism would ever apply to men. It would never apply to men, ever. This is a woman only thing. And that is the only moral imperative that it has, is to make this woman only, to free women from men and give them liberty by granting them money from class men as an entire class. And
if anybody's wondering about that, there's a report recently out of New Zealand that showed that over an 80-year lifetime, men contribute $0 into the tax system. So they cumulatively from birth to age 80, They, they contribute, their peak is at 65, just before they retire. They've contributed about $45,000 into the tax system, more than they have taken out. And by age 80, they've gone all the way back to zero. They break even. Women never get within $50,000 of breaking even at their peak time, the peak earnings that they have, the peak productivity economically in terms of the tax system, right? They are pulling out they have pulled out $50,000 more than they have put in. And then after age 65, it goes downhill to the point where they owe, at the end of an 80-year life, $150,000 more into the system. They owe that because they pulled $150,000 more out of the system than they put in, and they never broke even. They never were in the black, right? This is how long can we fucking do this, right? How long can we, and half the time, half of the problem is that we're prioritizing women's education, and we're prioritizing women's employment and subsidizing women to work. Sometimes, often, women who would rather not work, right? They would rather have $300 cash from the government every month to stay home with their kids than a $700 a month daycare subsidy. A lot of these women, right? That would help them more, right? But no, we're not going to do that. We're going to give them a $700 a month daycare subsidy, right? That leads to all kinds of other costs, and she's going to end up having to work and all of that, even if she doesn't want to. And oh my goodness, all of these workers in the workforce, the competition for jobs is just so much more the more workers you have. And so wages go down. And so her husband isn't earning as much as he would have been, maybe, if we weren't subsidizing women's participation in the workforce, right? So, like, this is really a situation where if women were not being subsidized to go to work, if women had to work like men do, which is, yeah, you just pay for your shit and you go to work, right? And you don't get free shit from the government to just, make it so that you can make $500 net at the end of the month after the government invested $1,500 into your freaking career, right? At Tim Hortons. If we stopped doing that, right, we might actually collect more taxes.
Yeah. And it's all in the name of female liberty. And it's a really very, very expensive social project in the name of quote unquote social progress. And eventually we would imagine that the payment will come due unless there's some really interesting forces at work, which we can't get into. But the question ultimately was, how did the right lose that moral authority? We covered how religion has no access to the government. We covered how nobody really wants authoritarian family values anymore. Karen covered that at length. I mean, the number of people who want authoritarian family values is pretty damn low. And the other big thing that destroyed authoritarian family values as a moral rallying cry, a moral centering point, was gay men, the gay male identity. And I don't mean that gay men, set out.
It's all your fault, gay men.
Yeah, I don't mean that they set out to destroy family values. And they didn't destroy family values as a community principle, as a personal principle, but they sure as fuck destroyed it as an authoritarian principle. I mean, if we wanted to go back to authoritarian family values, we wouldn't just have to give up porn. We'd have to start throwing men in jail for putting their dicks in other men's asses. Or we'd have to start throwing heterosexual couples in jail for having oral sex. We would have to become a draconian, police people's sexuality in a draconian and overbearing way. And when I say an authoritarian family values, I mean exactly that. I mean, family values are an unquestionable good. Nobody can question them. And it's totally justified to throw people in jail for violating them. That nobody fucking wants to. I don't even think there are I think there are very few conservative Christians who want to go back to that.
Yeah.
No. But
And you look at the pill too, was like it's an easy excuse to essentially set aside all of the concerns regarding like why was, you know, marriage so important? Why was, you know, well, because if you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant, and if you get pregnant, you're gonna have a baby, and if you have a baby, you should have two parents invested in it, and that's the way you do it, right? And that was the best way. It's always been the best way, and it still is the best way. But in terms of like having two parents to look after a kid, to raise a kid, but once we decoupled sex from procreation, we're just really we're really not. It gave everybody the excuse to really not be that concerned with people's sex lives anymore, right? Because you could have sex without having babies, right? So that I think as well relaxed, you know, a huge amount of our morals in society. It wasn't just gay men. Gay men pushed it so that, you know, you really had to stop looking at the equation of penis plus vagina equals baby, right? But you know,
but they essentially broke the authoritarian rights or the authoritarian family values contingent control over people's sexuality legally.
well, and people's children too. I mean, like, because it's not just gay marriage, it's not just gay relationships, it's not just gay marriage, it's also gay adoption, you know, and the right of same-sex couples to raise children, which I think is a right that they should have. But you know, it's something that just you can't have that without breaking apart the old paradigm. So
Yeah, and the thing is that it didn't just, I mean, it doesn't necessarily break apart the whole paradigm completely. It just makes it so that family values are no longer an unquestionable assumption, like an unquestionable assertion. Like that just breaking that stranglehold over the question was enough to seriously reduce their power as this kind of authoritarian moral standard. And it's like that. I don't have a problem with that. I observe this. I'm not going to say. I mean, I personally think that people should have freedom, sexual freedom, you know. But I'm observing the situation for what it is. Without that authoritarian family values, we have unchecked regressive left bullshit. The other thing that really is it's not just going to make it a problem to reinstate a family value standard, which I don't know if is even possible or if anybody really even wants to go there. If anybody even has the will to do it anymore. But the other thing that if I had thought about of all the things that I observe of the situation, this is the one that makes me wonder if the regressive left knew what it was doing when it did all this, and if it was actually targeting the authoritarian family values as a standard in order to instate its own. And that is the demonization of men. Because it's one thing to have the gay men break the stranglehold that authoritarian family values and make sure that people can ask the question. So family values are no longer a questioned assertion, that it's so important to uphold them that you can jail people, you can ostracize them, you can kill them, you can get them fired. It's no longer as that important to uphold them. But what makes me wonder if they actually knew what they were doing was because they followed that up with the demonization of straight men, and I guess bisexual men by inclusion into men who have had sex with women. But they followed up that gay male the destruction of the family value standard as an authoritarian standard with demonization of straight men, which means that now the authoritarian, like the family values, has to deal with the fact that men are considered to be toxic to women, that marriage is oppression to women, and that men are oppressive to women, and that they are going to beat and rape women and exploit them in the institution of marriage. This whole this whole feminist demonization of men, this entire propaganda campaign to see men as dangerous, as an enemy combatant to women, this is like, how can anyone say that family values is good for women in that context? And that was one of the main principles why the right really made family values, because they believed that they believed that a woman was better off with a man to support her, of course, but also that women tamed the savage beast and turned him into a productive member of society. And now you have the left saying that men are basically enemy combatants, come in to rape and beat your women. How can the right ever reclaim the moral legitimacy of family values under that kind of a rhetoric? I mean, they're essentially advocating the throwing women to the combatants who are going to come in and tear off their shirts and shove them down in the muck and fuck them until they bleed, and then beat the crap out of them.
They're also essentially, you know, if the right is saying, you know, women should be married, if you have convinced people like this GHDW that women were considered property within marriage, if you've sufficiently convinced all of society, including the right, that historically women were considered men's property, the property of their husbands, right? Then it is very hard to claim some kind of moral authority in terms of advocating marriage, because you're essentially advocating the selling of women into servitude and, you know, into being in a master-slave relationship with a man who can abuse them, right? That's what you're doing. Right?
Yeah, how can you have a family values standard when you have this pervasive propaganda that men are the enemies, like the enemy soldiers encroaching upon your land? Like it's impossible. So the right, and to be honest, the left, and I'm not saying that the right was responsible for this wide-scale demonization of men, but the left sort of hit them in an Achilles point when it came to this moral war. And that Achilles point is the right does not regard men as being innocent. It doesn't regard them as having a sexual innocence. It doesn't
innately good.
Or innately good. It doesn't regard male sexuality as innately good or innocent. It doesn't regard it as something that's vulnerable that needs to be protected. The right does regard male sexuality as being something negative that needs to be harnessed in a relationship with a woman, in a marriage with a woman, to become productive and tamed and not savage and rapey. So, I mean, as much as the liberal or the regressive left really hit the right hard with this demonization of men, which completely strips away any possibility of them advocating family values as a moral standard, but it also hit them at a spot where they were weak. And that was that kind of positive acceptance of men's sexuality as a positive a benefit to society, rather than something that just needs to be shackled to a woman in order to become, you know, tolerable. And that's another way that the family values standard really lost a lot of its power, and that is that demonization of men. When I look at that in hindsight, I'm like, holy fuck, someone was smart. Because if you slam the family values, authoritarian family values with the gay male identity, you make it so it can be questioned, that the family values can be questioned as a moral good. And then you follow up by saying, oh, by the way, marriage is slavery for women, where they are just treated like property and chattel and they're beaten and raped. So if you're going to advocate slavery for women, you're advocating family values. What I hear and what everyone's going to hear is that you're advocating slavery for women, and enslaved to a man, like a man who like most of them are probably going to beat and rape her. I mean, they're horrible monsters. I mean, that 1-2 punch and it's gone. Like the right has lost. It's basically lost 90% of its any kind of moral ability to claim the moral high ground. And so I think that those 4 factors: religion has no access to government, the gay male identity, the rise of the gay male identity. Nobody wants authoritarian family values anymore, and the demonization of men. those 4 factors really, and there probably are more factors that I haven't identified, but they're really the ones that knocked the right's moral authority out of the playing field. Like they knocked them out of the game. They're out. They're gone. So we're left with a regressive left's moral authority. And yeah, and the thing is that Trump's win, while it's good for the anti-establishment, it still represents the complete end to the family values as an authoritarian moral standard. Now, Republican candidate can't even have it to run and win. They can't even have a sniff of it. They can't smell of it, or they won't win. So it's like I said to you, Karen, I don't see how the left could have lost better than this. I don't see how the regressive left could have had a better loss than this.
Oh yeah, no, it's essentially, they've gotten a president who's dragged the Republican Party kicking and screaming into, cheering to, when he pledges his that he's going to protect LGBTQ Americans, their lives and their rights, the right to exist and all of that, right? And he gets cheered by a crowd of Republicans. Like you can't come back from that. They're not gonna be able to run on a platform of anti-gayness and be successful anymore. I mean, it's maybe 1 or 2 of them will, but in certain states, but it's like this is the beginning of the end of that for the Republican Party. You can't get past a moment like that. And for Lacey Green to act like, the lives of LGBTQ Americans are now in danger, they're now at risk, and marriages are going to be dissolved, and marriage certificates are going to be torn up, and gay people are going to start being electroshocked into being straight and shit. Like, yeah, no, none of that's going to happen, because Trump is not an anti-gay candidate. He's just not. And okay, so Pence might be a homophobe, but I don't think he's going to get away with any of that. He's not going to get away with it under Trump. If Trump gets assassinated, maybe, right? Maybe for 4 years he'll get away with it, and then the American public will rise up and they will elect Elizabeth Warren. Wouldn't that be nice?
Okay, so Joaquin Machado says, you're making the left out to be invincible. It's not invincible. Well, it currently is. Sorry. I hate to break it to you. And part of the reason why is really, like, when I say this, like I said, I am closest in politically to libertarianism, perhaps anarcho-capitalism, just because I'm like that. But libertarianism and this idea of personal freedom has its role to play in what's going on right now. Because if you look at, libertarianism versus authoritarianism, if you look at what the lunatics running through the streets, the zealots, the social justice warriors, this is what personal liberty as an unchecked moral good looks like when it hits people who think in black and white and need a Satan. This is what it looks like. They need someone to save, and they need someone to be evil. They need a damsel to save, and they need a villain so they can play the hero. This is what it looks like. And until we give these individuals who have this really black and white thinking something a little less psychotic, that they're going to continue to run roughshod over everything. I'm just putting that out there as a thought experiment. And when I say that I think the left is invincible at this moment, that doesn't mean that they can stay invincible. I think that there are things that we can do to start to really challenge their moral authority, but we got to do them. And I don't think, first of all, we're not going to be able to revive a family values platform. I don't think we could try. I don't know if it would work. I would think it would be incredibly difficult. And the very first thing that Republicans and Christian churches would have to do, and I don't think they have the balls to do it, would be to start to kick out the anti-male bullshit. They would have to start to embrace the idea that male sexuality is not innately rapey, that men are sexually innocent just like women, they have sexual goodness just like women, and women have sexual badness just like men. And they would have to really mount a significant challenge against the left's demonization of men, the regressive left's demonization of men. They would have to stand up and try to create a propaganda, not a propaganda campaign, but a reverse propaganda campaign to the same degree as what the right, the regressive left has created against men as a group. So they would have to create a reverse propaganda campaign against this idea that, you know, like, don't be that guy, this idea that all men are latently rapey. They'd have to create a reverse propaganda campaign against the idea that men steal sexuality from women. Therefore, men have to constantly ask for consent, but women don't have to do the same, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They would have to start healing all of this demonization of men. Otherwise, how are they going to promote family values when they're essentially saying, yeah, you women, for the sake of the society, we want you to go marry Satan. Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to get anywhere with that.
Yeah, well, no, and you know, honestly, I will give the right a whole bunch of credit, because the left has never actually invited me to speak anywhere. There have been no leftist organizations who have invited me to speak, and there have been some organizations on the right who have. And they are more willing to listen. They are more interested in, at least at this point, in the bigger picture. And that may be because they're anti this and anti that, and not because they're pro-male. But I literally spoke in front of a group in Edmonton, and I spoke like there was one speaker in between me and a woman who has taught women's studies, who was doing the whole women were property and women couldn't vote and all of this other stuff, right? And I gave a speech going all the way back to the origins of feminism, you know, back to the Declaration of Sentiments anyway. And I was just like, yeah, no. And I looked right at her in the audience and I said, no, none of this stuff was arbitrary. None of this stuff was just because vagina or just because penis. You know, like, there were reasons women had different rights than men. And that didn't mean that they were second-class citizens, and it certainly didn't mean that they were owned any more than that they owned their men, right? And I got swarmed by people. These are all like hard right-wing people. Got swarmed by them at the end. Number one, they were saying, I've never heard anybody say anything like that. That was just amazing. Like, that was really thought-provoking. And then number two, saying, oh, my brother is going through something like that, exactly like that right now.
Okay, I wanted yeah, and I think part of the reason why is the regressive left is flush with its moral power. It doesn't fucking need to listen to us. And the right has been dealt a lot of humbling blows, to the point where what they're left with is that fiscal conservatism, which it's just not as powerful a rallying cry as let's save the women. It just isn't. And to people who are intelligent and rational, let's save our pennies so that our grandchildren don't have to eat dirt. That makes sense. It's a great moral rallying cry, but it's not for the majority of people. And even people who are intelligent and rational still have that knee-jerk response to let's go save the women. And the left has the complete lockdown on let's go save the women. And the only way to get it away from them is the slow process of extrication, which is not necessarily going to be very comfortable for a lot of people. It's going to be like Lawrence of Arabia marching the Bedouin warriors through the desert to fight on an exposed flank of a city. It's like it was a hellish experience, but it was the only way they could win. This is probably not going to be a lot of fun. This is going to require a lot of soul searching. And No Men Required 123 says that this is not the left. This is crap. You're actually right. What we're talking about is not the left. We're talking about the church of what I call women worsting. It's not the left. I'm always, I like read what the Bernie bros say, and I'm astounded that they haven't realized yet that the socialism that they envision that includes men will never come about. Because what they think is the left isn't. It is just it is just female only socialism. They're never going to get this socialist utopia of men and women envisioned through the Church of Women Worsting. They're only ever going to protect women. They're never going to be beneficiaries. These Bernie bros are never going to be beneficiaries of the utopia they're trying to build. And it would be nice if they woke the fuck up to that. That in the Church of Women Worsting, they never win. And true socialism doesn't win, because true socialism is for all of citizens, not just one group of citizens, but all citizens. But when socialism is distorted by the Church of Women Worsting, it just becomes socialism for women, and men fit the bill. So it's the worst shitty aspects of capitalism for men and the very best aspects of socialism for women. That sounds like a fucked up deal. Anyway, and if I were a Bernie bro, I'd be like, you know what? I'm noticing this. I'm noticing that they're using my desire for this socialist utopia to perpetuate this whatever this is. This Frankensteinian woman firsting.
Okay. The church used to make the point that both women and men were capable of sin or doing wrong in essence. Yes, absolutely. That has slowly changed over the last few hundred years.
I think even longer than that. It's probably 1,000 years. When it first started, you have to understand the historical context of the church. When it first started, the word for virtue meant the virility of a man. So it was basically, virtue was maleness. So they were in a context where men really had like this complete sexual libertiness. There was a quote from a Roman man who said, well, on his wedding night, my sex life is none of your business, to his wife. So there was this, in that time period, there was this kind of idea that men could do no wrong. So the church sort of was in response to that. And it brought about the idea that both men and women could have sexual issues. However, it also brought about a mythology that is very female focused in a lot of ways, because you don't see Jesus as a sexual being. Yet Mary still has those qualities that bring her closer to God that are also very feminine qualities. Jesus isn't brought closer to God by, fathering children, having sex with a woman and fathering a child on her. But Mary was brought closer to God through the processes of the female body. And so over time in the Christian church, not only did the legal position of women initially improve greatly in Rome, but over time they just kept improving, and the social position as well. So there is this idea that men are purified through association with women, this kind of chivalrous idea. And that's you very much see that in Victorian England, with this kind of idea, this angel in the house, that woman elevates man through her moral purity. And that's very much a traditionalist concept. And that was their Achilles heel, because if regressive left had attacked through the family, through some sort of a more communist approach, like the family is the source of, they would never have gotten anywhere. So what they did is they hit the Achilles heel, which is the idea that women elevate men spiritually. Well, if women elevate men spiritually, then men are obviously less spiritual. They're more base, they're more demonic. And you can hit that. And you can start saying that, no, women don't elevate men spiritually. Actually, men taint women, and they put them in chains, and they take their innate purity, and they chain it up, and they hide it, and they oppress it. So it goes the other way. Women don't elevate men. Men de-elevate women.
There you go.
And that was the right's Achilles heel in a lot of this family values stuff. So, and the left just hit that, and they kept hitting it, and kept hitting it, and kept hitting it. And when I look at that, I'm now thinking that maybe all of these horrible propaganda campaigns, which I have yelled at and I've identified, that it's just ugly shit that the regressive left puts out directed towards men. The only thing that it has a parallel in is war propaganda against enemy soldiers. And the left is putting this shit out. And I was looked at it and I was like, it just really pisses me off. But now looking at it in this context, it is actually a strategically brilliant move.
Well, yeah, of course. Musological said, aren't you falling into the fallacy of false equivalence? You can't argue that genders are fundamentally different, but also that they are the same and just like the other. Yes and no. The genders are fundamentally different, right? They are. But every man is a mixed bag of good and bad, just like every woman. Every man is capable of sin. Every woman is capable of sin. Every man is capable of intentionally, maliciously transgressing on a person, and every woman is capable of the same, right? That's just how it is, right? Different does not mean one is morally superior and the other is morally inferior. Doesn't even mean that one's sexuality is more harmful than the other's, particularly in this day and age of all these artificial things that we have now. 2,000, 5,000 years ago, a man raped a woman, walked away, she got pregnant, and she was stuck with that, right? Now, a woman rapes a man, she has a baby, she sticks him with a $100,000 baby mortgage. And he's stuck with that. And it's not even considered a crime.
Yeah. And in order to defend against that, the family values contingent, the right would have to start developing an awareness of men's sexual vulnerabilities and creating something to just recognize men's sexual vulnerabilities and recognize men's sexual value.
And one of the things that has been so annoying to me is that it seems that the right are even more, and this is one of those things that they just will not let go. And this is why I'm positive that marriage was not an institution meant to enslave women or even repress women's sexuality. It was an institution that primarily existed to identify the fathers of children and hold them responsible, because that is the last vestige of marriage that the legal system is clinging to. We have no-fault divorce. We have all kinds of ways for women to get along without marriage, for women to get out of marriage on a whim, no reason given, whatever, right? There is no way for a man to get out of paying child support for a child that he sired. None. Zip. Zero. Nada. Even if he was a minor and she was an adult and she served jail time for it. Right? That is the one last piece of marriage that we have mutated into this fucked up thing that you don't even have to be married in order to be held responsible for as a man. Right?
Yeah. And here's another Black Market Medicine says, but I can be a victim too. Yes. I know that, I use this analogy with Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah. Marching through the desert, you get sand in your crack. Yes, men can be victims too. Let us move on from this fact. This is not going to be something that's easily dealt with. And having a psychological allergy to recognizing that, yes, you can be a victim. And that is being a victim of certain things is part of a male experience. It's like, can we just accept that and move on and start fixing this shit before we all fall off a fucking cliff? I mean, yeah, we're gonna march through the desert. You're gonna get sand in your crack. Yeah, as a man, you're gonna have to recognize that you can be a victim. I'm sorry. I'm sure, and using the analogy, I'm sure Lawrence in Arabia had a bunch of guys who are like, oh my God, I'm gonna get sand all up in my ass and it's gonna get everywhere. And I've just got my hair styled. I just can't do it. I can't march across that desert. I'm being an asshole. I know. Karen, go ahead.
You kind of are. But no, it really is. It's no, duh. Men can be victims. They don't like to see themselves as victims, and society doesn't like to see them that way either. And okay, so let's just discuss things in terms of basic fairness then. Like, I have a hard time with the victim narrative, no matter who it's applied to, whether it's women or men, even children, because, children, they deserve what they get. I'm looking at my child right now. But essentially, what we need to actually start doing is like looking at basic fairness, and we need to actually, and I think that the right, for all of their foibles and all of their flaws, right, they are the most welcoming in terms of this message, because they are the ones who think that, just falling in love can turn a man from a demon, from the beast into the prince, right? That is, he can be, changed by that. He can be transformed from the base material into some freaking alchemist's dream, right? But the left, right, or the regressive left, right, they think it should be some kind of fucked up government education indoctrination program that, so instead of the love of one woman can transform a man, it needs to be like everyday feminism and The Guardian, and, teach men not to rape, and, consent classes and all of this other shit. And I don't know. I think if I had to pick one of those visions of what manhood is, if I could not pick any other, if there were no other visions of what manhood is, and I had to pick one, I would pick the one on the right. Because all it takes is Sister Sarah to, temper Clint Eastwood a little bit. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately, the contextual stuff, there's a reason why we're dealing with this now, because the right couldn't actually prevent it. They didn't have the right kind of right kind of things to prevent it.
Well, and I think that they didn't necessarily see where it was coming from either. I think they sort of figured that it was like, I don't think that they realized that the demonization of men was such a huge, huge part of the process, and that they were helping, right? And that they actually are helping the regressive left when they hold a 15-year-old boy accountable for a child that he sired when he was raped by an adult woman, right? So anyhow, I don't know. Have we talked this thing to death?
I mean, we haven't got into what we can do to stop this or reverse it.
Well, I thought you were going to do a whole series of videos on that.
Yeah, I'm going to do a whole series of videos. We're going to probably piss off a whole bunch of people because it's not going to be fun.
Okay, well, but let's save it for then, because I bet you 100%. Oh my God, dog! 100% you'll be able to explain it better in a video with a whiteboard behind you.
Yeah, those people still say they don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about.
In a hamster suit, because I actually have to go because I have.
No, I know. You gotta deal with the things, and the whole sand in your crack was like, you know what, you've gone too far.
No, it was actually, you went too far this afternoon with Trudeau and Lacey Green and the elbow.
You keep bringing it up. Bringing it up.
I do.
Or no, I'm not saying it's you don't look. I'm saying that you use it as a finishing maneuver. The elbow,
like a donkey punch, only with the elbow.
No, but like in a world WW3, like WWF, sort of like elbow slam down to the mat, then the finishing maneuver, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I wasn't thinking of it like I don't know, elbow sex. No, I thought I wasn't supposed to bring this shit up.
That's all right. I brought it up for you.
Okay. All right. So were we going to do some shilling or?
Well, okay, we're going to shill the Karen smoking room. It is temporarily in the interim, before it is officially named, it is known as the Stronghold. And thanks to several commenters who thought that would be a good thing. I need a couch, and I need a gigantic ashtray. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I need. And
To be honest, like having this is also sort of like it's a way to give back to Karen for everything that she's done for I know, and for personally, she did make me, like, at least initially, until I learned that she's a cantankerous bitch, but she really gave me a sense that I wasn't alone with these issues. So it's a way to give back to Karen and also build something for the community, because eventually, when people can actually arrive at the Badger Cave and we have business hours and it's it's reasonable, it's not a mold infested hellhole, you'll be able to be part of it, be part of this, whatever this is. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's, to me, being able to make something for Karen. I can't go to her house and make it because she'd probably arrest me.
No, you can come here and just fucking clean up a little.
No, that's okay. I'd rather, because all that will happen is to get dirty again. But
true, I
can do something to create something that will show my appreciation for everything that she's done. And like I said, she made me feel, especially on Reddit, I remember reading her stuff and I'm like, here's a woman, first woman I've met, and I've been looking for another woman like me that actually seems to get it in some of the same ways that I do, on a level that is on an intuitive level.
I remember those days.
Yeah.
iPhone blue.
So if you wanna show your appreciation too and help me show my appreciation, go to www.feedthebadger.com. And it's the first item on the list. It's the Badger Cave furnishings, and right now we're still trying to get the basic furnishings. Hopefully we'll get a little bit extra to start building Karen's stronghold. And then when it's done, I'm gonna pester Karen to come up, and we're gonna start working on projects that people can read. So hopefully books will come out of that. So yeah, www.feedthebadger.com. Let's give Karen our thanks.
And give me all of your shekels too.
Yeah. No,
so
this is
many shekels. All right, are we done? I gotta.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm waiting for
all right. Well, on that, we're gonna trail off like we usually do, and cue exit music, I guess. I don't know. Good night.